So you've all heard of the golden rule, right? How many have heard of the golden rule? Okay, so the golden rule basically says do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself, right? It works under the basic principle that we all want to be treated the same. But sometimes that doesn't really work out very well, right? It doesn't take into consideration how we identify or our culture, right? When I was in college, I didn't even realize how important it was to know identifications or the importance of cultural identity. I just thought, I am who I am, and you are who you are, and that's cool. But it wasn't that way. When I was in college, I got called a dark spot in the snow. People used to insult me all the time. I went to a predominantly white institution, and sometimes it felt like an intentionally white institution. And a lot of the things that people would say that they found funny, I found racist. And now the game that the guys would spit to me and my girlfriends was lame, but it was also sexist. So we really struggled. There was a huge divide between the communities and the culture. And as a first-gen college student, so someone who had no parents or family who had gone to college before, I didn't know how to communicate those issues, right? I really struggled with telling people, don't treat me like that. That's not okay. You're being disrespectful, and I'm not okay with you using that type of language. It was really hard. And when I tried, sometimes the administration and the people that I would talk to said, it's a part of life. That's bullying. You're just being too sensitive. Grow some tougher skin. But that's not true. That's the wrong message to send. It's an alternative fact. So what you need to understand is that you have the right to stand up for yourself, and you have the right to embrace all that you are by owning your humanity. Now, what does that mean? It means self-love and giving more love and having a positive impact in society by embracing others. You may not always understand how another person identifies, but that's why it's important to be able to check yourself and communicate with others effectively. So how do we do that? Author H.P. Newquist says that the brain, in its full developmental capacity, weighing nearly 3 pounds, gives us an amazing gift to critically think. Now, what does that mean? It means that we have the right and the ability to process things, to be really intentional about how we take information in and how we give information out. Then UCLA professor Matthew Lieberman, in his book Social, How Humans Are Wired to Connect, states that the lifelong passion of humans is connection. So if we put those together, we're thinking critically, and then we want to connect with people. So we should think critically about how to connect with people in a positive way, how to support one another and engage one another and give more love to one another. And that's owning your humanity, right? It's uplifting each other, uplifting your next person next to you. You may not know the person next to you, right? So look to your left. Maybe that's your friend. Look to your right. Maybe that's your classmate. But do you know how they fully identify holistically? You may not know their gender, right? So whether or not they're feminine, masculine, cis, or trans. You may not know their sexual orientation. You may not know their disability or if they're able-bodied, because not all identities are visible, right? So I've had the privilege to be the student, the teacher, and the administrator. And you don't see those identities on me. A lot of times people mislabel me all the time, and they stereotype me. And what's a stereotype? It's when we make assumptions. And we do it all the time, right? You're walking in class, you're in the hallway, and maybe you see a girl with a brand name bag, and you think, oh, she got money. Look at her, look at that brand name bag. Or you see the student with the always raising his hand, and he always has the A's. You think, oh my God, he must be such a nerd. Or the teacher with the accent, must be an immigrant, right? We think those things, but they're so wrong. We're always making assumptions, and we need to check how we think about people. We don't know anything about these people. Maybe the girl with the brand name bag, that could have been a gift. Maybe she actually works 3 jobs just to make it to high school and is trying really hard to get to college. And you know why that's a possibility? Because that was me. When I was in high school, I got my first Coach bag. And it's a Coach bag that I still carry to this day. And I worked 3 jobs. I came from a lower socioeconomic status. I lived in the projects, and I tried really hard to make it to college. College was my pathway out. And so the only way I was gonna do that was by working really hard. So I traveled 5 hours every day to go to school and back, round trip. And then I also worked 3 jobs. It's really important. You have to find your way and make your way and not let anybody else stereotype you. But they do, because people used to always think, oh, you got money. And I didn't have no money. I didn't even have any savings to go to college. So it's really important that you always find a way to not stereotype. Sometimes when we stereotype threat. Stereotype threatening is basically when you have someone live up to the stereotype. So all the times that you continue to tell somebody negative images, they start to live up to that hype. So for example, you give negative messages daily, right? So social psychologist Claude Steele says that that's a microaggression. Microaggressions are the daily negative messages that we give to each other. So sometimes it's in humor. Sometimes people use jokes and they're like, oh, can I touch your hair? I want to touch your hair. How's that look? Or you look really cute today. And there's all types of hate in those messages, right? You're wondering like, ooh, something's wrong with you. There's all types of hate, but it's not direct. It's not upfront. It's all subliminal and indirect. Those are microaggressions, and a lot of times they do add up, and the person who's receiving all of that feels some type of way, especially when it comes to language, identification, the way we carry ourselves. So we need to be able to bridge the gap and ask questions and check ourselves. Dr. Laura Bernay would say we would do that with intercultural communication. Now that sounds like a super spiffy theory, but it's really simple. It's basically just finding ways to communicate between the cultures. And how you do that is really simple. You see a person, you don't necessarily know how they identify, you're confused about something, so you sincerely ask. There is no dumb question. I'm sure you hear that all the time in school. There's no dumb question. You don't understand something, have a conversation. You want to know something more about something, just do it. Intercultural communication happens all the time, but we need to be intentional about it, right? We need to critically think, like Newquist says, so that we can build that connection the way Lieberman says. And that's really important. You probably do that with your parents all the time. Think about it. The language you use, this idea of varying English, it's true. The things that you say now, I'm gonna get lit. Your parents didn't use lit, they used dope, or they used cool. It's so different. You use Facebook now as a tool to connect. They didn't have that. They didn't even have cell phones, most of them. They had handsets connected to the walls. Y'all looking at me like, I don't know what that is. Because there's a difference in generation, and it's really important that you understand the difference and you build those connections with everybody. It's really important to check your assumptions and build the bridges within the cultures. You also need to make sure that you're not microaggressing, which we do all the time. And it's hard, right? Owning your humanity is not always so simple, especially when the nation is telling you that certain lives don't matter, when global warming is taking away our resources, when terrorism is on the rise. Now it's more complex than ever to try to stay positive. But the reality is that you need to be able to do that. When I was in college, it would have been easy to retaliate. I grew up in the hood. We could have fought. But the thing. I didn't want to lose my scholarship, right? I had an 80% scholarship to go to college. I didn't want to lose that. That was more important to me. Leaving the hood was more important to me so that I could make it out there. And that's what I'm saying. You need to make sure that you prioritize what's going to be your story, what's going to be the way that you connect with the world. How are you going to fulfill your passions? And how are you going to make a positive impact with each other? What's going to be your footprint? Not just your carbon footprint, but the footprint that you leave when you think about your next steps. Some of you talked about going to college. Some of you are thinking about going into the work field, and that's great. But the only way you can do that is making sure that you build those connections, because it's so important to have a community of people behind you. Don't forget about the person next to you. Don't forget about the family that you have. Don't forget about the people that are going to be coming up behind you. That's so important. So instead of treating people how you think they should be treated, make sure that you ask the question, how do you like to be called? What's the way I can best respect you? How do you like to be appreciated? Because that matters. And every time that somebody mistreats you, think about that. We don't always walk in the same footsteps, right? We don't always wear each other's shoes. And if you ever wonder if that's true, sometimes you drive up 690 East and West, people have the signs out there. Sometimes they don't have shoes. So always let that be a reminder. We don't walk in each other's shoes because sometimes we don't even have the shoes to share each other's footprints. Make sure that you're always building community, and when you don't know how to do that, just ask the question. That's the platinum rule. Forget the golden rule. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.